So I have a question. It's rhetorical, but, and I think I know the answer, that each and every one of us, there's probably at least one day on the calendar that comes every year that has particular meaning for whatever that meaning is. And it could be something positive, it could be something negative, but it certainly has a stirring effect on us when that day comes. And as in the amazingness, if that is a word, of spirit, to be able to share my story with you today. Today, August 31st, is the 14th anniversary of the day I was going to kill myself. It was the day that I was going to end my life on August 31st, 2011, by jumping off the close by Forest Hill Bridge. And the Forest Hill Bridge at 730 feet tall is actually 500 feet further off the ground than its more famous cousin in San Francisco. And what I like to share with people when I go around and share my story is, on that day, I wasn't going to kill myself because of what I was thinking. And I wasn't going to kill myself because of what I was feeling. I was going to kill myself because of what I believe. And that's an important distinction for me, because I think everything that each and every one of us does ultimately can be traced back to our individual belief related to that. And on that day, what I believed to be true was that I was worthless and useless and stupid and pitiful and grotesque and ugly, that I had no redeeming value whatsoever. And more profoundly sad was, what I believed to be true was, that if I killed myself, everybody in my then life, my first bride, Deanna, my family, my friends, that everybody would be exponentially better off without me. I believed those things to be true. And so I made my way to the bridge, parked my vehicle, put the note that I wrote on the dash of the car, and then worked my way to the midpoint. And by the grace of God, by the grace of Spirit, as I was leaning over, not so much to jump, but to fall, somebody saw that. Somebody saw me, picked up the phone and called 911. And a sheriff's deputy approached me from the left-hand side. And I always like to say is two things. What he didn't do was make any contact with me at all. And what he did do is create connection. And that's life-saving, because connection creates hope, and hope saves lives. And I was taken off the bridge to an emergency room, and then I was going to go to a psychiatric facility where I would spend the next 15 life-changing days. And it began this journey. People say, well, what do you do? And I say, well, I share my journey from mental hellness into the space of mental wellness, which has been a less than straight and narrow path. It has been up and down and sideways and in all kinds of directions. And when Rev asked me to speak, and I looked at the date, I'm like, oh my gosh, I've never spoken on the 31st of August. Been around it, but never on the day. And I'm like, wow, wait, like, what am I going to talk about? And Spirit gave me an idea on a way to reflect over these last 14 years. Like, what has these 14 years meant to me? And so I want to do a metaphor. And I think if you'll remember last time I spoke, we included toilet water in the illustration that I used. There is no toilet water today. And Robin, we can fill you in on this one next time. So, but so I want to imagine, so here's a glass. I weighed this glass, and the glass weighs 15 and a half ounces. It's just your typical normal glass. So if I take this glass and I place it somewhere and I let it sit for an hour, would the weight of the glass change at all? Of course it wouldn't. It would be the same weight. If I left it there for 6 hours by itself, not touching it, but leaving it alone, would the weight change? Would it? What if I left it for a day, maybe a week, maybe a month, maybe a year? If I left that glass, would the weight of the glass change? And of course, the answer is no. But consider this. What if I hold the glass? Now, what if I hold the glass for an hour? It's only 15 and a half ounces. It's not real heavy. What if I hold it for an hour? Would that change the weight of the glass? What if I held it for a day? What if I held it for an entire day? What about 2 days? What if somehow I could hold it for a week? Would it change the weight of the glass? It wouldn't. However, would it feel heavier to me the longer I held it? Would it become arduous? Like, I mean, I don't even know. It's only 15 and a half ounces. I mean, I've never held a glass for I don't know, 30 minutes, much less an hour, much less 12 hours, much less a week. Like, how hard would it be to hold up this thing that hasn't empirically changed weight, but it feels so much heavier the longer I hold on to it? And then the longer I hold on to it, would I start to feel pain? Pain, it would start to hurt. And then wouldn't it be interesting to see how that pain then would radiate? Maybe it would start at let's just hypothetically say my wrist. And then it would radiate up my arm, probably impact my shoulder, probably then move to my neck, and then next probably down, start to go on my spinal column, maybe start to go down and hit my back, maybe even start to go down both or at least one of my legs, so that it would radiate and impact my entire body, and yet the weight of the glass doesn't change. What dictates how it impacts my life is how long do I hold on to this? So I'd like you to imagine that this is not just a glass, it's your life. And specifically, it's let's say that this bottle, this is not just water. These are regrets. These are mistakes. These are things that you wish you said, things you wish you didn't say, things that you did, things that you wish you didn't do. This is unresolved trauma. These are the negative aspects of life that maybe we still hold on to. And our glass is full. So August 31st, 2011, my glass was full. And it was things that I had held on to. I was 48 years old at the time, and it was unresolved trauma. It was the trauma of having been raped by a Boy Scout leader when I was 12 years old. And as a child of the 70s, when we were told you don't talk about something, you didn't talk about it. And so that, amongst other things, mistakes and grief and everything else, but the bulk of my glass 14 years ago was full of those experiences when I was just 12 years old. And at the time, and I've shared this before, I was married to an amazing woman who, by the grace of the universe, we're still very close friends. We ran this amazing animal sanctuary. And 14 months prior, on June 2nd, 2010, we were the cover story. Actually, I got it right here. The cover story in the life section of USA Today. Just 14 months before that, there we were. And now I'm about to kill myself. And I couldn't hold on to the glass anymore. And Maya Angelou, because everything Maya Angelou says is amazing, I came upon a quote of hers that when I read it the first time, I burst into tears because it explained exactly what I had experienced. It explained this, how arduous it is to hold on to this glass that we have that's full of things that we haven't processed, talked about, looked at, dealt with, let go of. And she says, there's no greater agony than bearing the weight of an untold story. I'm like, oh my Lord. Yes, exactly. And being taken off that bridge to a psych ward and then to begin this journey, then how do I empty my glass? How do I let go of this? And it's interesting because we think, well, just dump it out. But if you just dump it out, that's not necessarily going to do anything that's going to be positive. There's a difference between spilling something, which is an accident, which tends to get over people or things or something, then you got to clean that up, as opposed to pouring something. That's intentional. That has direction. That's like, okay, it's not going to make a mess. And so what I've come to realize for me in the last 14 years is, first, for me to empty my glass, is I've got to do it in connection with at least one other person. And I shared this in the city this morning, that if you go back to, we, of course, we're truth students at Unity. We have a different perspective, but it doesn't mean that everything in the Bible that we don't agree with, or we don't like or love. And one of my favorite passages is when Jesus tells us, when two or more are gathered, there I am. And we know in Unity the power of the I am statement. And interesting that the I, which is singular, but only comes after the plural aspect of when two are more. And so for me, the articulation is connection. And it's not a definition technically, but it should be, because it came out of an equally wise, amazing soul, Dr. Brene Brown. And she says this: I define connection as the energy that exists between people when they feel seen, when they feel heard, and when they feel valued, when they can give and receive without judgment, and they derive strength and sustenance from the relationship. Like, oh my God. Like, that's it. And that's when, for me, over these 14 years, is I've been able to take this glass, my soul, my mind, my body, and then start to not spill it, not dump it. Although I have done those things, but then I got to clean those messes up. So I really haven't gotten rid of anything. But in the space of my first counselor, Barbara, in the space of David, in the space of Jen, in the space of my first wife and my second wife, my three brothers, in hundreds of hours of individual therapy, hundreds of hours of group therapy, to be able to to have this, and then start to, well, we can let some of this go. So now we look at, okay, maybe it doesn't get fully empty, but wow, okay, that's different. And that now the weight literally is different, because we've taken some of that stuff out. And I think, and I didn't mention this in the first service, because I always save my best stuff for the second service. Don't tell the first service. So now there's some space created to add something different. It can be, it doesn't have to be empty, but I mean, it can be. And if I look at the power of connection and what we can do with it, it is astonishing to me how incredibly powerful it is. And in fact, my brother Tom, knowing how much I love this whole thing about connection, he shared with me a story recently in which they wanted to look at the impact of connecting with people, doing something, remembering their name, sending them a text, writing them a card, asking them about their life, creating connection, seen, heard, valued. What was that if we compared that to, say, self-care? What for the individual, the person who is the practitioner of both, what has more of an impact? And this was incredible. They did that, and again, this is science. It was shown factually that doing things for other people, especially in this aspect of sacred connection, was actually more valuable to the person who did it than it was if you did the traditional self-care. I'm like, oh my gosh. Like, in other words, you can't help but to get it on you. And I really endeavor to practice this every day. And I've talked before about names, and I was recently talking to somebody from the electric company, and I had called, and they said, hey, if you don't want to wait in line on the phone, we'll call you back. And so they called back, and the person identified, said, hi, my name's Robin, I'm with PG&E. And I got a little worked up, and then I saw, which was me, not her, and I thought, okay, practice what you preach. And so I thought, all right, let me just take a breath. And I said, you said your name's Robin, right? And she said, yes. And I said, now, is that with an I or a Y? I'm on the phone. And she says, oh my God. She said, nobody ever asked that. And they always spell it wrong. It's with a Y. She said, thank you so much for asking me. I couldn't, like, I, it's amazing to me. Just on the phone. So that little touch, and then I know how I felt. And there's other ways that we can do it. And one of the ones that has helped me tremendously happened it was 5 years ago. And so until 5 years ago, August 31st of every year was the worst day of the year for me for understandable reasons. And plus I'm a January baby. I'm really, summer's kind of not my thing. And so interesting, the universe has a sense of humor because my wife's name is Summer, which I think is hilarious. So 5 years ago, I get this card in the mail. So it says advice from a glacier. There's no return address. I'm not in the mood. I don't know if you've ever been that way where, I'm not in the mood for PMA, like, motivation, not today, because I'm being triggered. And so what it says is advice from a glacier, just in case you were curious, carve your own path, go slow, channel your strengths, smooth the way for others, keep moving forward. How about whatever? I'm just not in the mood. I mean, you would say I'm angry. I'm gonna throw it away. Like whatever. And it's almost like the universe, like physically took my hand and pried them and said, look, stupid. No, the universe is kind. Said, look, dear one, open it up. And thank God I did. Because it says, happy today. Written by my great friend Greg, who he remembered the day. Like, how did you remember that? Hey, just a note to remind you that you are an extraordinary person with so much to give so many others. You are a tremendous source of healing just by your personable presence. This is not only my sentiment, so many others also believe in you. Believe in yourself, reject the lies. I love you. Completely transformed. Today is today for me. This is New Year's Day. This is when the year starts. It starts today. And I shared in the first service. So when I don't speak, I have started to drive for Uber and Lyft. And one, because life is expensive, it's nice to have, but it allows me an opportunity to practice my theories of connection. And I don't tell people what I do unless they say, hey, is this your primary gig? I said, well, no, I actually do this other thing. And so the other night, 2 nights ago, was last ride of the night. And I was with a wonderful gentleman. His name was Mix, Miks. And I picked him up. Mix was probably 50, 55. Picked him up from he was taking acting classes. Well, come to find out, he loves acting. He's been taking classes for quite a while. And so we just really got into this whole conversation. And then I said, well, gosh, have you had, a paid gig? And he said, no, not yet, but one day it'll come. I'm, whatever. And I said, wow. I said, what do you, I say, what do you, I said, well, what kind of work that you do? And he says, well, I work at a psychiatric hospital. I'm like, oh, okay. I said, what do you do there? And he says, well, I do medical billing. And I'm like, wow. I said, which psych hospital? And he said, Kirby Hills. And I said, I actually paused for a moment because I said, well, I think the universe has set this up. I said, well, Mix, I was a patient there. I didn't know if he wanted to know his Uber driver had been a patient at the psych hospital. But he said, really? I said, yeah, brother, I was. And it was an amazing, amazing experience. And so we talked about that. And then, so now we're making the way to his home. It ends up where he lives is like in this cul-de-sac where these apartments are, which you can literally see the hospital. And to think about the fact that the universe to me set that whole thing up to like the last ride of the night of a guy that works at the hospital where I was 14 years before and gave me the opportunity to just drive by that place. And I have nothing but fond memories about it, but it just the the healing in which to then to take, a little bit more out of that glass. And so what I'd leave you with is to be mindful. I think we're all carrying something. And the longer we hold on to it, the heavier it becomes, even though it actually doesn't, but it feels heavier. And then if we hold it longer and longer and longer, the pain that is caused by the fact that we're holding on to it and we haven't not spilled it but poured it, and by sharing in connection with some another, it starts to impact all parts of who we are. And my glass is going to get filled again, absolutely. But I know I have this beautiful soul who just got married, and I can call him. I mean, there's so many different souls who are willing to help me pour what's in here, what's inside, out, and let it go. And so to be here with you of all days is just such an incredible, wonderful gift. And I send I love you all, and just give thanks in saying Happy New Year, that these next 12 months for all of us will be extraordinary. So God bless and thank you.